They say money screams, but wealth whispers. However, inside the exclusive onyx room that night, wealth was roaring with laughter. Preston Holloway, a billionaire tycoon, thought he was untouchable. He pointed at a trembling waitress and bet his entire reputation, and $100 million, that she couldn't crack the world's most impossible safe. He saw a servant. He didn't know he was looking at the daughter of the man he had destroyed. What happened next didn't just open a vault. It exposed a 20-year-old crime and brought an empire crashing down. You might think you know how this ends, but you have no idea what was actually inside that safe. The tray in Audrey Reed's hand weighed less than 5 pounds, but after 6 hours of navigating the crowded, perfume-choked air of the onyx room, it felt like an anchor dragging her toward the floor. She adjusted her grip, her knuckles white against the silver plating, and forced herself to weave through the tuxedoed bodies. She was 24, with hair the color of roasted coffee beans pulled back into a severe regulation bun, and eyes that were observant, intelligent, and entirely ignored by the people around her. To the clientele of the Onyx Room, Manhattan's most exclusive, members-only speakeasy hidden beneath a legitimate bank, Audrey was not a person. She was a floating pair of hands that delivered champagne and removed empty plates. She was furniture. "Watch it," a man snapped as he backed into her, spilling a drop of his martini on his own cuff. He didn't apologize. He merely brushed the fabric with a look of distaste, as if Audrey's proximity itself was a stain. "Apologies, sir," Audrey murmured, her voice steady. She didn't look up. She had learned long ago that making eye contact only prolonged the interaction. She moved toward the bar, her mind drifting to the unpaid medical bills sitting on her kitchen counter in Queens. Her mother's surgery was scheduled for next Tuesday, and the insurance company had sent yet another denial letter that morning. They needed $40,000, and they needed it yesterday. Audrey was currently calculating how many double shifts she would need to work to cover just the anesthesia when the music in the room abruptly stopped. The heavy velvet curtains at the far end of the hall parted. A spotlight, harsh and white, cut through the dim, amber ambiance of the lounge. "Ladies and gentlemen, titans of industry!" a voice boomed. Preston Holloway stepped into the light. Even from the back of the room, Preston radiated the kind of arrogance that could only be bought with generational wealth. He was in his late 50s, tanned to the color of expensive leather, with silver hair swept back immaculately. He wore a tuxedo that cost more than Audrey's entire education. "Tonight," Preston announced, raising a glass of scotch, "marks the merger of Holloway Industries and the Sterling Trust. But as you know, I am a man who enjoys a little sport." A ripple of polite laughter moved through the crowd. Audrey paused by a marble pillar, using the shadows to hide, while she rested her feet for a stolen second. She watched Preston gesture to 2 large security guards. They wheeled out a massive object covered in a silk tarp. "My competitors say I take too many risks," Preston continued, his grin wide and predatory. "They say I leave my assets exposed. So, I decided to make a statement." He yanked the tarp down. A collective gasp went through the room. It was a safe, but not just any safe. It was a monstrosity of black iron and polished brass, standing 6 feet tall. The door was a complex, chaotic mess of gears, cogs, and 3 distinct dial mechanisms. It looked less like a bank vault and more like a piece of Victorian torture equipment mixed with futuristic engineering. Audrey felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The tray in her hand trembled. She knew that safe. "This," Preston declared, patting the cold metal, "is the Iron Sovereign. It was commissioned in 1925 by a paranoid, distinct czar, and was thought to be lost to history. It has no digital interface, no electronics to hack. It relies on a triple-axis tumbler system that has baffled the best locksmiths in Europe for 50 years. Audrey's breath hitched. She took a step forward, forgetting her place, forgetting she was supposed to be invisible. It wasn't called the Iron Sovereign. That was a lie. It was called the Labyrinth. And it wasn't built in 1925. It was built 20 years ago, in a small, dusty workshop in Brooklyn, by a man named Arthur Reed, her father. She remembered the smell of machine oil and sawdust. She remembered sitting on her father's lap as a 4-year-old, watching him sketch the schematics. "This is for us, Audrey," he had whispered, his hand stained with grease. "This lock isn't about keeping people out. It's about keeping the truth in. Once I sell this patent, we'll never have to worry about rent again." But they did worry about rent, because Arthur Reed died in a suspicious car accident a week before the patent was filed. The designs vanished, and Preston Halloway's company had launched a new security division 3 months later. Audrey stared at the safe, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Preston had it. All this time, he had the prototype. "I have placed the deed to my vacation estate in the Hamptons inside this box," Preston announced, his voice booming, "along with a bearer bond for $100 million. It is a symbolic gesture, of course, because no one can open it. I have hired the best safecrackers in the city to try. They all failed." He scanned the room, his eyes glittering with malice. He was drunk on power, high on the adoration of the crowd. "In fact," Preston laughed, "I'm feeling generous. I'll give the contents of this safe, the full 100 million, to anyone in this room who can crack it in under 10 minutes. Come on, who wants to try? You, Gregor? You're good with numbers." The man named Gregor, a portly banker, laughed nervously. "I'd rather not look like a fool, Preston." "Cowards, all of you," Preston roared, clearly enjoying himself. Then his eyes landed on the shadows near the pillar. He spotted Audrey. Maybe it was the way she was staring at the safe, her expression intense and unblinking. Maybe he just wanted a prop to humiliate, to show the gap between his world and hers. "You there?" Preston called out, pointing a manicured finger directly at her. The room went silent. Hundreds of heads turned. Audrey froze. "Me, sir," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her. "Yes, you." "The girl with the cheap shoes and the tray," Preston beckoned her over. "Come here, put the drinks down." Audrey's manager, a nervous man named Wallace, hissed from the side. "Go! Do what he says, Reed." Audrey walked forward, her legs feeling like lead. She set her tray on a nearby table and stepped into the harsh white spotlight. Up close, Preston smelled of scotch and expensive cigars. The safe loomed behind him, a dark, silent beast. "What is your name, sweetie?" Preston asked, his tone condescendingly sickly sweet. "Audrey," she said, her voice finding its strength. "Audrey Reed." Preston didn't react to the last name. Why would he? Arthur Reed was a nobody to him, just a loose end he had snipped 20 years ago. "Well, Audrey," Preston announced to the room, draping a heavy arm around her shoulders. She flinched but didn't pull away. "You look like a girl who could use a raise. Minimum wage is a tragedy, isn't it?" The crowd chuckled. It was a cruel sound. "Tell you what," Preston said, turning to face her fully. "I need to prove a point to my new partners about the security of Halloway assets. If a common waitress, a service professional, can't open this safe, then certainly no thief could." He leaned in close, his breath hot on her ear. "Give it a try. Spin the dials. Make a show of it. If you can open it, you get the 100 million. If you can't, well, you can bring me a fresh scotch." "And if I refuse?" Audrey asked quietly. Preston's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then Wallace fires you." tonight, and I make sure you don't get hired anywhere in this city." It was a trap, a game for a bored billionaire. He wanted to watch her struggle, to watch her look confused by the complex machinery, so everyone could laugh at the simple girl trying to understand high-level engineering. Audrey looked at the safe. She looked at the 3 dials, copper, silver, and gold. She looked at the intricate etching on the door. "Listen to the heartbeat, Audrey," her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Every machine has a pulse. You just have to find it." She looked at Preston. "I don't want the scotch," she said, her voice ringing out clearly in the silent room. Preston raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "I want it in writing," Audrey said. The room erupted in gasps. Preston Holloway stared at her, his mouth slightly open. For a second, the mask of the jovial billionaire slipped, revealing the ruthless shark beneath. But then the laughter returned. Louder, harder. "In writing!" Preston shouted, slapping his knee. "She wants a contract. Did you hear that, Gregor? She thinks she has a chance." He turned back to Audrey, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "You have spirit. I like that. It's pathetic, but I like it." He snapped his fingers. "Wallace, get a napkin and a pen. Let's make this official. I don't want Audrey here suing me for emotional distress when she fails." Wallace, the manager, scurried over with a linen napkin and a Mont Blanc pen, looking terrified. "Audrey, just apologize and pour the drink," he hissed under his breath. "Don't do this." "Write it," Audrey said, her eyes locked on Preston. Preston scribbled furiously on the napkin. "I, Preston Holloway, agree to transfer ownership of the contents of the Iron Sovereign safe to Audrey Reed, upon the condition that she opens said safe within 10 minutes of this agreement. Signed, Preston Holloway." He held it up mockingly. "Witnessed by 300 of New York's finest. Is that satisfactory, Counselor?" "Yes," Audrey said. She took the napkin and folded it neatly into her apron pocket. "Start the clock," Preston yelled. 10 minutes to become a queen, Audrey, or 10 minutes to prove you belong exactly where you are." He stepped aside, crossing his arms, waiting for the show. Audrey stepped up to the Iron Sovereign. Up close, the safe was even more intimidating. The metal radiated a chill that seemed to seep into her fingertips. The 3 dials were arranged in a triangle formation. The top one was gold, the bottom left silver, and the bottom right copper. Most people would assume you had to turn them one by one. But Audrey knew the truth. This was her father's masterpiece. This wasn't just a lock. It was a musical instrument. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, blocking out the murmurs of the crowd. "She's just staring at it," a woman in a red dress whispered loudly. "Probably doesn't even know which way to turn it," a man chuckled. Audrey reached out. She didn't grab the dials yet. Instead, she placed her palms flat against the cold iron door, spreading her fingers wide. She pressed her ear against the steel plating, ignoring the grease that might stain her face. "What is she doing? Hugging it?" Preston jeered. 5 minutes left, darling. Don't fall asleep." Audrey tuned him out. She was listening. She needed to feel the settling of the tumblers. She tapped the metal near the hinges with her fingernail. Ting, ting, thud, thud. There it was. A dead weight in the lower quadrant. A gravity latch. Her father had installed a gravity latch to prevent burglars from using drills. If you drilled or hammered, the latch would drop and seal the safe forever. "It's a gravity-biased triple-axis system," Audrey muttered to herself. She opened her eyes. The room was blurry, her focus entirely on the mechanism. She reached for the top gold dial. Most safes required a combination like left 40, right 10, left 20. But Arthur Reed hated numbers. He loved stories. The combination to this safe wouldn't be random numbers. It would be a sequence of movements based on resistance. She spun the gold dial clockwise. It spun smoothly, oiled to perfection. She spun it faster, letting it whir. Then, abruptly, she stopped it. Click. A tiny sound, imperceptible to anyone else, but to Audrey, it was a gunshot. "One," she whispered. She moved to the silver dial. She turned it counterclockwise, slowly. She felt the vibrations traveling through her fingertips. The crowd began to quiet down. There was something about her intensity, the way her hands moved with the precision of a surgeon, not the clumsiness of a novice, that unsettled them. Preston's smile faltered slightly. He took a sip of his scotch, his eyes narrowing. 7 minutes, he called out. But his voice lacked the earlier boom. Audrey ignored him. She was sweating now. The heat of the spotlight was intense. The silver dial was tricky. It had a false gate, a trap designed to make a lockpicker think they had found the number, only to jam the lock if they proceeded. She felt the false gate. It felt like a loose tooth, a slight wiggle in the gear. She bypassed it, pushing past the resistance until she hit the true gate. Clunk. A heavier sound. 2, she breathed. Now, the copper dial. This was the hardest. This dial controlled the dead man's brake. It had to be turned in perfect sync with the gold dial. She reached up with her left hand to the gold dial and kept her right hand on the copper one. "Hey!" Preston shouted, stepping forward. "One hand only. That's how these things work." Audrey didn't look at him. "This isn't a standard Diebold, Mr. Holloway. If I use one hand, the torsion spring will snap and lock us both out. Unless you want your bond trapped in there for another 100 years, I suggest you let me work." The authority in her voice stunned him. He halted, looking around at the crowd who were now murmuring with genuine interest. He couldn't stop her now without looking scared. "Proceed," he grunted, adjusting his tie. "But you're wasting time. 4 minutes." Audrey synchronized her hands. She had to turn the gold dial right while turning the copper dial left, maintaining equal tension. It was like rubbing your stomach and patting your head, but with the pressure of $100 million and her father's legacy on the line. Her arms began to shake. The tension in the springs was immense. She needed to find the sweet spot, the moment of equilibrium where the gears aligned. She turned. Creak. She adjusted. Groan. The safe was fighting her. It was as if the spirit of the machine was testing her, asking, "Are you his daughter? Do you have his touch?" "Come on," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "Papa, help me." She felt a sudden release in the tension. A harmonic vibration hummed through the door. Click-clack. Both dials locked into place. The crowd gasped. Even Preston took a step back, his glass freezing halfway to his mouth. She engaged the tumblers, someone whispered. Audrey wasn't done. The door was unlocked, but it wouldn't open yet. There was one final step, her father's signature, the coup de grace. She released the dials and stepped back. She looked at the center of the door, where a large iron handle shaped like a lion's head sat. "Time is ticking," Preston barked, sweat beading on his forehead now. 2 minutes! Open it or get out!" Audrey didn't grab the handle. Instead, she balled her hand into a fist. "You can't force it!" a security guard yelled, stepping forward. "Stay back," Audrey commanded. She took a breath, aimed, and struck the door hard with the heel of her hand, exactly 3 inches above the lion's head. Wham! The impact echoed through the room. For a second, nothing happened. Preston opened his mouth to laugh. "Pathetic!" Ka-chunk! The sound of massive internal bolts retracting echoed like thunder. The heavy iron door groaned. Slowly, agonizingly, it swung open just an inch. The silence in the onyx room was absolute. Audrey reached out, hooked her finger around the edge of the door, and pulled. The heavy door swung wide open, revealing the velvet-lined interior. But as the light hit the contents of the safe, Audrey's blood ran cold. There was a stack of cash. Yes. There was a deed. Yes. But sitting right on top of the money was a thick, leather-bound book. A book Audrey recognized instantly. It was her father's journal. The one that had gone missing the night he died. And sitting on top of the journal was a rusted, blood-stained watch. Her father's watch. Audrey turned to look at Preston. The billionaire's face had drained of all color. He wasn't looking at the open safe with anger. He was looking at it with terror. "You," Preston whispered, his voice trembling. "Who are you?" Audrey reached into the safe, bypassing the cash, and grabbed the journal. She held it up for the room to see. "I'm the girl collecting on a debt," she said. The silence in the onyx room shattered like a crystal glass dropped on concrete. "Seize her!" Preston Holloway screamed, his face twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. The charm was gone. The billionaire facade had melted away, revealing the desperate, frightened tyrant beneath. "She's stealing company property, security. Don't let her leave with that book." The two massive security guards, who had been standing like statues by the velvet curtains, sprang into action. They bulldozed through the crowd of stunned socialites, knocking over tables and sending expensive cocktails crashing to the floor. Audrey didn't think. She reacted. Her father had taught her lock-picking, but growing up poor in a rough neighborhood had taught her survival. She shoved the heavy leather journal down the front of her apron, pressing it tight against her chest. With her other hand, she snatched the linen napkin, the contract, from the table where she had left it. "That's my inheritance," she yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You all saw it. You all witnessed it." "She's a liar," Preston roared, scrambling over the safe, trying to reach her. "Get her!" The first guard, a man whose neck was wider than Audrey's waist, lunged for her. Audrey dropped to her knees. The guard's momentum carried him over her, and he crashed into the open door of the Iron Sovereign. The heavy steel door swung slightly, clipping his shoulder with a sickening crunch. He howled in pain. Audrey scrambled to her feet. The path to the main exit was blocked by the second guard, and a throng of confused millionaires who were too drunk or too shocked to move. She couldn't go out the front. She turned toward the bar. Wallace, her manager, stood there, clutching a bottle of Dom Perignon, his eyes wide with terror. He looked at Preston, who was now red-faced and screaming obscenities. And then he looked at Audrey, the girl who had never missed a shift, never complained, and who was currently holding a smoking gun that terrified the most powerful man in the room. "Wallace, please," Audrey pleaded, her eyes searching his. Wallace hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he pointed a shaking finger toward the kitchen swing doors. "The service elevator," he hissed. "It opens into the alley. Go!" "You're fired, Wallace!" Preston shrieked from across the room as he saw the exchange. "I quit!" Wallace shouted back, and with a surprising burst of courage, he threw the bottle of champagne onto the floor between the second guard and Audrey. The bottle exploded, creating a slick, foamy barrier of glass and alcohol. The guard slipped, flailing his arms like a windmill, and went down hard. Audrey didn't wait to see him land. She bolted through the kitchen doors. The kitchen was a blur of stainless steel and steam. Chefs shouted in confusion as she sprinted past the stoves, dodging waiters carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres. "Out of the way!" she screamed. She hit the back exit door with her shoulder, bursting out into the cold, rainy New York night. The alleyway smelled of garbage and wet asphalt. The service elevator was locked, but the fire escape ladder was down. She grabbed the rusted rungs and began to climb. Below her, the kitchen door banged open. Preston Holloway stood there, flanked by his remaining security. He looked up, rain plastering his silver hair to his skull. He didn't look like a titan of industry anymore. He looked like a predator whose trap had failed. "You can't run, Audrey," he shouted, his voice echoing off the brick walls. "I own this city. I own the police. Give me the book, and I'll let you live. Keep it, and you'll never see sunrise." Audrey didn't look down. She scrambled up to the roof, her breath tearing at her throat. She vaulted over the parapet and ran across the tar-papered surface, jumping the small gap to the adjacent building. She knew this route. She used to smoke up here during breaks when the stress became too much. She scrambled down the fire escape of the next building, dropping into a busy side street 3 blocks away from the Onyx Room. She merged into the crowd of tourists, pulling her hair out of its bun and ripping off her apron. She was trembling violently. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a cold, creeping terror. She clutched the journal against her ribs. She could feel the hard edges of the book through her thin white shirt. She needed to get away. She needed to go home. No, she realized, stopping dead in the middle of the sidewalk. I can't go home. Preston knew her name. He knew who she was. By now, his men would be heading to her apartment in Queens. They would be waiting for her. And her mother. "Mom," Audrey whispered, horror dawning on her. Her mother was in the hospital, awaiting surgery. She was a sitting duck. Audrey patted her pockets. Her phone was gone. She had left it in her locker at the club. She had no money, no phone, and the most dangerous man in New York hunting her. She reached into her pocket and felt the crumbled linen napkin. "I, Preston Halloway, agree to transfer ownership." It was a piece of paper. In the real world, billionaire lawyers would tear it to shreds in seconds. But the book was leverage. She ducked into a 24-hour bodega. The clerk, an elderly man named Mr. Henderson, who had known her since she was a kid, looked up from his newspaper. "Audrey?" he asked, squinting at her disheveled appearance. "You look like you've seen a ghost, child." "I need a favor, Mr. Henderson," she gasped, locking the door behind her and flipping the sign to closed. "I need to use your burner phone, and I need you to not tell anyone I was here." "Trouble?" he asked, his face grave. "Big trouble," she said. He reached under the counter and slid a cheap, prepaid cell phone across the glass. "Take it. Go out the back." Audrey took the phone. She didn't call the police. Preston was right. He owned the precinct captains. She didn't call a lawyer. She couldn't afford one. Instead, she dialed the one number her father had made her memorize when she was 10 years old. A number he said was for emergencies only. A number that hadn't been dialed in 14 years. It rang once, twice, 3 times. "Yeah?" a voice answered. It was gravelly, tired, and sounded like it had been gargling whiskey for a decade. "Is this Elias Thorne?" Audrey asked, her voice shaking. There was a long silence on the other end. "Who's asking?" the man grunted. "I'm Arthur Reed's daughter," Audrey said, "and I just opened the Iron Sovereign." The silence on the other end was so long, Audrey thought he had hung up. Then she heard the sound of a chair scraping against a floor, as if the man had stood up suddenly. "Where are you?" Elias asked. His voice was no longer tired. It was sharp, alert. "I'm at 4th and Main. I have the journal." "Listen to me very carefully, kid," Elias said. "Get off the street. Go to the subway. Take the R train to the end of the line, then switch to the G. Get off at the abandoned station at City Hall. Do not go home. Do not go to the hospital. Do not trust anyone in a uniform. Do you understand?" "Yes," Audrey whispered. "Run," Elias said. "Halloway isn't just a businessman. He's a butcher, and you just walked into his slaughterhouse." The abandoned City Hall station was a ghost of New York's past. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that filtered down from the street grates above. The curved, tiled ceilings were beautiful, but the air was stale and cold. Audrey sat on a rotting wooden bench, shivering. It had been 2 hours since she fled the bodega. Every shadow looked like a hitman. Every siren made her heart stop. Footsteps echoed in the tunnel. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Audrey stood up, backing away, clutching the journal like a shield. A figure emerged from the shadows. Elias Thorne looked like a man who had been chewed up by the city and spat back out. He was in his 60s, wearing a trench coat that had seen better decades. He had a grey beard, pockmarked skin, and eyes that were constantly scanning the perimeter. He walked with a slight limp. He stopped 10 feet away from her. "You look just like him," he said softly. "Same stubborn chin." "You knew my father?" Audrey asked. "I knew Arthur better than anyone," Elias said, taking a pack of cigarettes out of his pocket, but not lighting one. "We served in the Navy together. I was the investigative journalist who was supposed to break his story, the story that got him killed." He nodded at the book in her hands. "Is that it?" Audrey handed it to him. Elias took it with reverent hands. He ran his thumb over the leather cover, his expression pained. He opened it to the first page. "God," he whispered, "it's all here." "What is it?" Audrey asked, stepping closer. "Preston said it was just a patent dispute. He said my father was just a locksmith." Elias laughed, a dry, barking sound. A locksmith? Arthur was a genius. But the Iron Sovereign wasn't just a safe, Audrey. It was a vault for evidence. Elias led her to a small maintenance room off the platform where he had set up a makeshift office, a camping lantern, a folding table, and a laptop. He opened the journal under the light. 20 years ago, Elias explained, flipping through the pages, Preston Halloway wasn't a billionaire. He was a contractor. He won the bid to build the Skyline Bridge, the one that connects the boroughs. It was a massive government contract. Audrey nodded. "I know the bridge. Thousands of people use it every day." Arthur was the chief safety engineer for the project, Elias said. He pointed to a page covered in Arthur's frantic handwriting. "Look at this entry. Date, October 14th, 2005. Audrey read the faded ink. "Preston is swapping the steel. The Grade A tension cables are being replaced with cheap imports from a shell company. He's pocketing the difference, nearly $40 million. I tested the stress load today. The cables will hold for now, but in 20 years, with wind erosion and salt, they will snap. It won't happen today. It will happen when the bridge is full. It will be a massacre." Audrey felt sick. "He built a bridge that's designed to fail?" "To save money," Elias said grimly. Arthur confronted him. Preston tried to bribe him. When that didn't work, Arthur built the Iron Sovereign. He stole the original shipping manifests, the fake safety reports, and the audio recordings of Preston admitting to the fraud. He locked them all inside the safe. "And then he died," Audrey whispered. "Preston cut the brake lines on his car," Elias said bluntly. "We knew it, but we couldn't prove it because the evidence was in the safe, and the safe, well, nobody could open it." Preston took the safe, thinking he could crack it eventually. He kept it as a trophy, a symbol of his victory over the one man who stood up to him. He never thought Arthur's daughter would walk into his club and pop it open like a soda can. Audrey looked at the journal. "And the watch? The blood-stained watch I saw?" "Arthur was wearing it when he crashed," Elias said softly. "Preston must have taken it from the wreckage before the police arrived, a memento of the kill. That watch, if it still has Arthur's DNA and maybe fibers from Preston's clothing, It connects Preston to the scene of the accident. Audrey sank onto a crate. The weight of it was crushing. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about a stolen patent. It was about mass murder waiting to happen. The Skyline Bridge was a ticking time bomb, and Preston Holloway was the man holding the detonator. "He offered me $100 million, Audrey said, her voice trembling with anger. "He treated it like a game, all while he's sitting on a pile of corpses." "And now he's desperate," Elias said, closing the book, "because the 20-year mark Arthur predicted. That's next month. The bridge inspections are coming up. If this gets out now, Holloway Industries collapses, and Preston goes to prison for life. Or the electric chair." Elias looked at her seriously. "You have the leverage, Audrey. But leverage is dangerous. Preston has mobilized everyone. The news is already running the story." He turned his laptop around. On the screen was a breaking news banner. "Waitress wanted for grand larceny and assault." The anchor was speaking gravely. "Police are searching for Audrey Reed, 24, who allegedly attacked a security guard and stole highly sensitive corporate documents from the Onyx room tonight. Billionaire Preston Holloway has issued a statement calling her mentally unstable and dangerous. A reward of $1 million has been issued for information leading to her capture." "He's painting you as a crazy thief," Elias said. "If the police find you, they won't arrest you. They'll hand you over to Preston's private security, and you'll disappear." "What do we do?" Audrey asked. "We can't fight a billionaire." "We don't fight him with money," Elias said, a glimmer of a smile returning to his face. "We fight him with the one thing he can't buy, the truth. But we need to be smart. We need to get this evidence to the federal prosecutor, not the local cops, and we need to get your mother to safety." Audrey's eyes widened. "My mother? She's at St. Jude's Hospital." Elias grimaced. "That's the first place they'll look." As if on cue, the burner phone in Audrey's pocket buzzed. She froze. "Nobody has this number except you and Mr. Henderson." Elias signaled for her to answer it, but put it on speaker. Audrey pressed the button. "Hello?" "Hello, Audrey." Preston Holloway's voice oozed through the tiny speaker. It was smooth, calm, and terrifying. "How did you get this number?" she demanded. "Mr. Henderson is a very pragmatic man," Preston said. $100,000 tends to loosen tongues. Don't blame him. He has grandchildren to feed." Audrey gripped the phone tight. "I have the journal, Preston. I know about the bridge." There was a pause. The air on the line crackled with tension. "Smart girl," Preston said, his voice dropping an octave. "Like father, like daughter. But you're making a mistake, Audrey. You think that book is a weapon. It's actually a death warrant." "I'm going to the FBI," Audrey said. "Are you?" Preston chuckled. "I don't think so. Because while you're running around playing detective, I'm currently standing in the VIP suite of St. Jude's Hospital." Audrey's blood turned to ice. "Don't you touch her." "Your mother is a lovely woman," Preston continued. "Very frail. The doctors tell me she needs surgery urgently. It would be a shame if complications arose, or if the hospital funding was suddenly cut and she was discharged onto the street tonight." "You monster!" Audrey spat, tears streaming down her face. "I'm a businessman, Audrey," Preston corrected. "Here is the deal. Bring me the journal. Bring me the napkin. Meet me at the Skyline Bridge. Fitting, don't you think? In 1 hour. Alone. If I see cops, she dies. If I see anyone else, she dies. If you're late, she dies." "I'll be there," Audrey said. "The South Tower. Midnight. Don't disappoint me." The line went dead. Audrey looked at Elias. The old journalist was already packing up his gear. He reached into a duffel bag and pulled out a heavy, black object. It was a taser. but it looked modified. "You're not going alone," Elias said. "He said he'd kill her." "He's going to kill her anyway, Audrey," Elias said, grabbing her shoulders and shaking her gently. "Think. If you give him the book, he destroys the evidence, kills your mother to tie up loose ends, and kills you. You are the only loose ends left." "So what do I do?" Audrey cried. "I can't let her die." "We're going to that bridge," Elias said, his eyes hard as flint. "But we're not going to make a deal. We're going to set a trap. Arthur built that bridge. He knew its secrets. And thanks to this journal," Elias tapped the leather book, "so do we." The rain had turned into a torrential downpour. Thunder rattled the skyscrapers of Manhattan, but up on the Skyline Bridge, the wind was the real enemy. It howled through the suspension cables, singing a high-pitched, mournful song. Audrey stood at the base of the South Tower. She was soaked to the bone, her hair matted against her face. She held the journal in a plastic Ziploc bag Elias had given her. It was midnight. A convoy of 3 black SUVs rolled up the maintenance ramp, their headlights cutting through the rain like searchlights. They stopped 20 yards away. Doors opened. 6 men in raincoats stepped out, forming a perimeter. Then, Preston Holloway emerged from the middle vehicle. An assistant held a large black umbrella over him. He looked impeccable, dry, and utterly in control. 2 more men dragged a wheelchair out of the back of the van. "Mom!" Audrey screamed, taking a step forward. Her mother, pale and groggy from medication, was slumped in the chair. A nurse, no, a woman dressed as a nurse but looking far too hard, stood behind the wheelchair, her hand resting ominously on the frantic woman's shoulder. "Audrey," her mother moaned weakly. "Where are we?" "Stay back," Preston shouted, his voice amplified by the wind. "The book first." "Let her go," Audrey yelled back, holding the journal over the edge of the railing, toward the dark, churning water of the East River below. "Or the book learns how to swim," Preston flinched. "Don't be stupid. You drop that and you have nothing." "I have nothing anyway," Audrey retorted. "Let her go. Put her in the first car and let her drive away. Once she crosses the checkpoint, I give you the book." Preston laughed. "You are in no position to negotiate." He snapped his fingers. The woman behind the wheelchair pulled a syringe from her pocket. She removed the cap. "No!" Audrey screamed. "The book!" Preston demanded, holding out his hand. "Now!" Audrey looked at her mother, then at the book. She began to walk forward, her legs shaking. She felt defeated. Elias was hiding in the maintenance gantry above. But what could one old man do against 8 armed guards? "That's it," Preston sneered. "Bring it here. Be a good waitress." Audrey reached the halfway point. Preston stepped forward, eager, greedy. He wanted that book more than he wanted air. Suddenly, a loud metallic clang reverberated through the bridge structure. It sounded like a hammer hitting a bell the size of a house. Preston paused, looking around. What was that? Audrey stopped. She smiled. It was a cold, terrifying smile. "That," she said, raising her voice, "was the sound of the Iron Sovereign." "What are you talking about?" Preston snapped. "The safe is at the club." "Not the safe," Audrey said. "The bridge. My father didn't just design the safe, Preston. He designed this tower, and he knew you were stealing materials. He knew the cables were weak." "So?" Preston scoffed. "The bridge is still standing." "Yes," Audrey said, "because he built a fail-safe, a secondary tension system hidden inside the tower legs. He wrote about it in the journal. He called it the Dead Man's Break. High above them, in the shadows of the steel girders, Elias Thorne pulled a massive, rusted lever that he had located, using the journal's schematics. Screech. The sound of metal grinding on metal was deafening. The bridge beneath their feet shuddered violently. What did you do?" Preston screamed, losing his balance. "The failsafe was designed to lock the bridge down in case of a collapse," Audrey shouted over the noise. "But if you engage it when the bridge is stable, it creates a harmonic vibration." The bridge began to shake. Not just vibrate, shake. The SUVs bounced on their suspension. The lights on the cables flickered. "It's going to collapse," one of the guards yelled, dropping his weapon. "No, it's not," Audrey yelled. "It's just singing. But look." She pointed to the main suspension cable, the one Preston had replaced with cheap materials 20 years ago. Under the intense, artificial vibration caused by the failsafe, the cheap casing on the cable began to crack. Pop, pop, pop. Pieces of the outer shell exploded off, revealing the rusted, corroded wire beneath. "The vibration exposes the weak points," Audrey yelled. "You see that, Preston? That's your fraud. Exposed for everyone to see." Preston looked up in horror at the crumbling cable. But he wasn't looking at the cable. He was looking at the flashing blue lights approaching from the Brooklyn side of the bridge. "Police!" Elias's voice boomed from the loud hailer system in the tower. "This is the FBI. We have been monitoring this frequency." It was a bluff. Elias wasn't the FBI, but the sirens were real. The vibration had triggered the bridge's automatic seismic sensors, alerting the authorities to a potential structural failure. The Coast Guard, the NYPD, and the Port Authority were all converging on the bridge. "You bitch!" Preston screamed. He pulled a gun from his coat. He didn't care about the book anymore. He just wanted to kill her. He aimed at Audrey. "Hey!" Preston turned. His own head of security, the man who had dragged the wheelchair, had his gun drawn. But he wasn't aiming at Audrey. He was aiming at Preston. "Put it down, Mr. Holloway," the guard said calmly. Preston looked at him, stunned. "What are you doing?" "I pay you." "Yeah," the guard said, glancing at the crumbling cable that threatened to drop them all into the river. "But you didn't pay me enough to die on a bridge you built with duct tape and glue. I have kids, man." "Traitor!" Preston shrieked. He swung the gun back toward Audrey. Bang! The shot rang out, but Audrey didn't fall. Preston Holloway staggered back, clutching his shoulder. The guard had fired. The gun clattered from Preston's hand and slid across the wet pavement, disappearing over the edge into the river. Preston fell to his knees, clutching his bleeding shoulder. The rain washed the blood down his expensive tuxedo. Audrey ran to her mother. She pushed the fake nurse aside, who offered no resistance, fleeing toward the SUVs, and embraced her terrified mum. "It's okay, Mum, it's okay," she sobbed. Sirens wailed all around them. Helicopters hovered overhead, their spotlights pinning Preston to the ground. He looked small now. Pathetic. Audrey stood up and walked over to where Preston was kneeling. She looked down at him. "You promised me $100 million, she said quietly. Preston looked up, his eyes full of hate and pain. "Go to hell." Audrey reached into her pocket and pulled out the linen napkin. She dropped it onto his wet lap. "Keep it," she said. "I'll take the truth instead." She turned away as the SWAT teams swarmed the bridge. She didn't look back at the man who had destroyed her family. She looked up at the towering steel of the bridge, listening to the hum of the vibration. It sounded like her father humming a tune. If the Onyx Room was a den of lions, the Southern District Federal Court was a pit of vipers. 3 weeks had passed since the incident on the Skyline Bridge. While the media hailed Audrey Reed as the girl who cracked the billionaire, the legal reality was grim. Preston Holloway was out on bail, backed by a phalanx of Manhattan's most expensive defense attorneys. They had spun a narrative that the bridge damage was natural wear and tear, and that Arthur Reed's journal was a forgery created by a disgruntled daughter. In a cramped conference room, Audrey's public defender, an overworked woman named Sarah Jenkins, slid a paper across the table. They're offering a settlement, Sarah sighed. $50,000. You sign a non-disclosure agreement, admit the journal is fake, and walk away. Audrey stared at the paper. It was enough to pay her mother's medical bills. It was the safe choice. No, Audrey said, pushing the paper back. My father died for that truth. I'm not selling it for 50 grand. The trial was a spectacle. Preston Holloway sat at the defense table, looking impeccable and confident. His lead attorney, Sterling Vance, was a shark who tore through the prosecution's witnesses. He confused the jury with technical jargon about tensile loads and made the bridge defects sound like minor maintenance issues. When Audrey took the stand, Vance circled her like a predator. Ms. Reed, Vance sneered. You are a waitress with a high school diploma, correct? You have no engineering degree? No, Audrey replied. So, we are supposed to believe your interpretation of a 20-year-old diary over certified experts? You claim you opened the Iron Sovereign, a feat declared impossible, in 10 minutes. Isn't it more likely you stole the combination to stage a publicity stunt? I listened to the lock, Audrey said calmly. You listened to it? Vance laughed, playing to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a fantasy. She's a fraud looking for a payday. Audrey gripped the railing. She saw Preston smirking. She closed her eyes, remembering the vibration of the tumblers. I can prove it, Audrey declared. Bring the safe into this courtroom. I'll open it again. Right now. Vance hesitated. To refuse would look weak. We have no objection, he stammered. Let her fail. The next day, the Iron Sovereign stood in the center of the silent courtroom. Audrey approached the massive black iron box. She didn't have the noise of the club to fight against. She spun the gold dial, then the silver, then the copper. Her hands moved with a fluid, hypnotic rhythm. She wasn't just manipulating gears. She was conducting a symphony written by her father. At exactly 8 minutes and 40 seconds, Audrey stepped back. She looked at Preston, whose smirk had vanished. The truth doesn't stay buried, she whispered. She slammed her palm against the door. Wham! Ka-chunk! The massive bolts retracted, and the heavy door groaned open. The courtroom erupted, but Audrey raised a hand. Wait, look at the door! She pointed to the inside panel of the thick steel door, a surface that had been hidden against the wall of the safe, even when it was open at the club. Under the bright courtroom lights, an engraving was clearly visible. Your Honor, Audrey shouted, those aren't just scratches. That is a schematic of the bridge's weak points. And right there, she pointed to a string of numbers stamped into the steel, is a Swiss bank account number. The prosecutor rushed forward. Account 77 Alpha Zurich. That's the account where the missing $40 million was wire transferred in 2005. My father didn't just write it in a book, Audrey said, staring at a pale Preston Holloway. He engraved the proof into the steel of the safe itself. Unless Mr. Holloway wants to claim he engraved his own offshore illegal account numbers, this proves he knew. Preston slumped in his chair, burying his face in his hands. The game was over. The safe itself was the witness that couldn't be bought. The fall of Preston Holloway was swift and brutal. It took the jury less than 3 hours to return a verdict. Guilty on all counts: fraud, embezzlement, and gross negligence. While the murder charge for Arthur Reed couldn't be definitively proven due to degraded DNA, the financial crimes alone were enough to bury him. Preston was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. Holloway Industries plummeted, and the board of directors fired him before the bailiff had even led him away in handcuffs. But for Audrey Reed, the victory wasn't complete. There was still the matter of the napkin. 2 weeks later, Audrey sat in a high-rise conference room, facing Catherine Pierce, the ruthless new CEO of the Sterling Trust, which had absorbed Holloway's crumbling assets. "It's a fascinating piece of paper," Catherine said, sliding the linen napkin across the mahogany table. "But let's be real, Miss Reed. A drunk bet on a cocktail napkin isn't a binding contract. If we go to court, we will argue Preston was under duress. We will tie this up in litigation for a decade. You won't see a dime." Audrey didn't flinch. She sat straighter, no longer the invisible waitress, but a woman who had toppled a titan. "You're right," Audrey said calmly. "The napkin is legally weak, but the public perception, that's a nightmare. I'm the hero who saved the bridge. You're the corporation trying to cheat me out of a reward." "We can weather bad press," Catherine countered coolly. "Maybe," Audrey said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick blue folder. "But can you weather this?" She slid the folder across the table. Catherine opened it, and her eyes widened. "My father held the original patent for the iron sovereign mechanism," Audrey explained. "Preston didn't just steal the safe. He stole the design. He used it to create the Holloway lock, the standard security system used in 80% of American banks. I had my associate, Elias Thorne, run the numbers. The unpaid royalties on that patent over the last 20 years come out to roughly $112 million. Audrey leaned forward. "The napkin was a bet. This is intellectual property law. If I sue for patent infringement, I will win. And I will strip the Holloway name off every bank vault in the country." Catherine stared at the documents, then at Audrey. She saw the resemblance to the genius inventor Arthur Reed. She realized she had lost. "You are your father's daughter," Catherine sighed, capping her pen. "What do you want?" "I want the patent returned to the Reed estate," Audrey stated. "I want a settlement for the back royalties, $100 million, and one more thing." "Name it." "I want the Onyx Room." 6 months later. The neon sign above the door no longer said the Onyx Room. It simply read Reed's. The velvet ropes and the pretentious air of exclusivity were gone. The space had been transformed into a vibrant jazz club and a community workshop for young engineers. It was loud, alive, and welcoming. Audrey walked through the crowd, a glass of wine in hand. She spotted Elias Thorne in a booth, typing the final chapter of his biography on Arthur Reed, a book that was already climbing the bestseller lists. "How's the hand?" Elias asked, closing his laptop. "Better," Audrey smiled. "And Mum loves Florida. She sends her love." Elias nodded toward the back of the room. The Iron Sovereign was still there, polished and proud, but the door was welded permanently open. Inside, illuminated by a soft spotlight, was a framed photo of Arthur Reed holding a young Audrey on his shoulders. "He never cared about the money, you know," Elias said softly. "He just wanted to build things that lasted." "He built us," Audrey replied. "I'd say that's a pretty good legacy." Audrey looked around the room. She had walked into this basement as a servant, ignored and undervalued. Now she owned the building. She had the $100 million in the bank. But as the jazz band played a soulful tune, she knew the real victory wasn't the cash. Preston Holloway had bet his fortune that money could buy silence. Audrey Reed had proved that the truth was the only thing you couldn't put a price tag on. Preston Holloway thought he was playing a game with a desperate waitress, but he forgot the golden rule of mechanics. Leverage changes everything. Audrey Reed didn't just open a safe. She unlocked a 20-year-old mystery that brought a corrupt empire to its knees. In the end, the Iron Sovereign wasn't a vault for money. It was a time capsule of justice. Preston is rotting in a cell, and the waitress he mocked is now the CEO of her own destiny, proving that while you can inherit wealth, you have to earn respect. If you enjoyed this story of karma, high-stakes engineering, and sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that the underdog bites back. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.